So again, we're on step 10. We're going to be working out of the 12 and 12 on page 88. But you can also, if you have your big book, keep it open on page 84. Might be a good idea because I might touch base on that a number of times as we kind of go through. And just something that came to me while these prayers were going on. You know, oftentimes in our journey of recovery, and we're kind of accepted this program, this way of life, and we kind of start moving through the journey of recovery. The primary thought in our head is we start looking for God's will. And I think, you know, I often talk about we finish the steps, or maybe we haven't finished the steps, and then we go and we try to practice the principles in all of our affairs, which in theory is a good idea. And I'm not going to say stop doing that. But the real process of the step 10 is to actually identify my will, do something about it, and then leave the results up to God. And where it talks about on page 85, every day is a day where we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. It's like, okay, now I go over to page 84 in the big book, and it says, you know, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. That's my will. If I'm aware of what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, I am fucking tuning into my will. And that's the first step in this process. And then it says, when these crop up, we ask God to remove them at once. So now I'm asking for some extra power, another aspect of help. God, I need help right here. You know, remove this from me because I've identified it. And then it says we discuss them with somebody immediately. And then as I discuss them with somebody immediately, oftentimes because I'm so used to living my life with the best of intention, I won't always see maybe the different layers of my will. Or maybe I don't even see my will at all, but I'm actually, you know, pretty firm in my judgment that this person's wrong and that I'm not at fault or whatever it might be. So we kind of follow the process anyway. But the benefit of calling someone immediately is because when we look at the literature and it says the alcoholic is driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, I take that as word, and I might not be able to see it. I might be stepping on the toes of my fellows with these defects or with whatever behaviors, and then I hurt them and I hurt myself seemingly without provocation. So I don't necessarily see it. But it does say invariably we find that sometime in the past we have made decisions based on self. Invariably means almost always we will find that we have made a decision. Maybe it's not right even in that moment. Maybe I made the decision back a ways. Okay. But the benefit of this other person that I consult in, God-centered 12-step, that knows what they're talking about, or at least is trying, they can show me things that I can't see about myself. And so when we really look at this step 10 process, it's actually step 4, it's step 5, it's step 6, and it's step 7, 8, and 9. And really what I'm actually performing as I'm being willing to turn my will and my life over, and then I actually do turn my will and my life over, and I'm leaving these results up to God. Because oftentimes as I'm acting in will, I'm trying to get something, or I'm afraid I'm losing something. And that's why I'm acting in these behaviors. And to just tie this together in the step 4, so the first process is identifying selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, or whatever it might be. It could be more than that. It boils down to that, but it could be, you know, maybe judgment or self-righteous judgment. It could be, you know, lust and best of intention on maybe going for the opposite sex and hitting on them. And it could be masked as many things. But when we look at step 4, it's like, okay, we're here to face the facts, look at the facts, find the truth about stock in trade. One object is to find damaged and unsaleable goods and discard them without regret. If the business is to be successful, it cannot fool themselves about the value. So if I'm to be successful, I can't be fooling myself with the best of intentions, my self-delusion, or my fear. I have to look at the facts, which the other person that I call can help me do. And then as I face the facts, there's a level of humility in facing the facts. Because I don't always like to admit that this is a defect, or that this is wrong with me, or that I'm doing something out of, my defects. I don't like to admit that. But looking for the facts and then facing them, and then looking for the truth about stock in trade. The whole truth, the best that my pillar can see it, and I can see it. The truth about the stock in trade might not be my truth, but it might be closer to the truth. And when we think about truth in this program, it always brings me back to honesty. Okay, honesty is very subjective based on the journey of life that you've experienced. It's kind of like an opinion. All opinions are based on what you fucking learned and what your beliefs are and where you've learned it and all these kinds of things. Truth is very similar. Honesty is very similar. So as I kind of get rigorously honest is the key, and I start looking at these things in a more accurate way, then I can see the truth about stock and trade, because the word rigorous means accurate. And as I speak with somebody else and we're talking, we go back and forth, I can actually uncover, discover, and start to recover from the things that are blocking me from God. And oftentimes, because I'm so tunnel visioned in my own ways, a light bulb will come on and go, fuck, I see that. And once I see that, I can fucking now work towards the healing aspect of it. And it might only be a little tiny bit at a time, but that's not the point. The point is that I'm working towards that direction and I don't really stop. And it all boils down to the step 6 theory. What is the theory? Any person, that's us, capable of enough willingness and honesty to motivate me from these defects to try repeatedly step 6, repeatedly on all my faults, not just some of them, without reservation. Without reservation. That's kind of the goal in this. As we identify and we work towards it, we're going to stop and have a reservation. What's the reservation? It's going to be, whoa, I don't want to lose something and I don't want to look bad, or I'm afraid that I'm not going to get something, or how's this going to go down? And I start fucking figuring out what this is actually going to look like. There's the reservation. And what that reservation is actually based in, it's based in fear. And it's based in the ego. And if you think of the ego like this, ego, that's how ego spell, it's edging God out. So right off the bat, you had a reservation. You're now working in the ego, which is in a fear, and you have now worked in the absence of love. So the goal here at some point down the road is to be working without reservation and doing God's will, which is based in love all the time, as much as we can. And through that process of working in principles and character, you might not actually get what you want. Because a lot of what you want or we want is based in what we've already learned, what we think is good for us, what we're supposed to get. I'm this old and I should have this, and that's the way this is, so I'm going to go for it. Or I'm a man and I'm supposed to be like this, so I do this because I'm a man. Or my cultural beliefs, or whatever the sentiment or the ideology in the background says that you should do or be. The thing about this is we have to let go of those old ideas. And the more that we let go of these ideas of what we should be and how we should be based in the ego or the world of the material or what our parents told us and blah, 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 then we start becoming who we're truly meant to be. And I'll kind of add this. I've done hundreds of step 5s. And a lot of my step 5s go for at least 7 to 15 hours. And the number one thing that I've seen out of the step 5s that I've done over the years is the person's never been able to be who they're truly meant to be. They're living a life based on what society or culture or their family or, what they think they should be based on someone else's ideas. And then it dawned on me in my own life one day, where did I even get most of these ideologies and belief systems that I think are right or wrong? I realized most of them weren't even mine. They were imposed upon me and I accepted them without any fight because I didn't know any different. And now when we get down to this work, we start realizing certain ideas maybe aren't good for us, and maybe certain ideas that we think are really good for us, we have to let go of. It's often like this. We usually think of judgments that we think are bad for us that we need to let go, that block us from God and cause us pain. What about the judgments that you think are good for you? It's the judgments that you don't think are good for you that are just as debilitating and block you off from God the same. But you don't see it because you think that it's good for you. So sometimes we got to kind of let go of what we think is good for us so we can find out the truth of ourselves. And as we journey down this road to truth, I'm going to say truth in our own being, you have to stand in the truth of fear at some point and speak in the truth of fear maybe to somebody, or in self-righteousness, or in whatever it might be. But if you have a desire to find that self-love and truth, on the journey to truth, you will find it. And along that journey, you might have to set boundaries out of your fear, out of insecurity, which is what we're actually taught in our society. Set these boundaries. You don't have to put up with that. Keep this person in your life, block them, do this, do that. Set these boundaries. But when we set a lot of these boundaries, we're actually resisting the lesson and we're resisting the fear because we never get to learn what it is that we're scared of. We just push it away and we resist it. And whatever you resist will always persist. So the beating continues till the lesson is learned, kind of thing. So once we start like looking at every interaction as a lesson and we learn the lesson, and then we can start seeing what's actually good for us. Each group is autonomous, except in matters affecting other groups or A as a whole. We are all autonomous, and we can see where our defects affect other people in the world as a whole. So as we kind of start becoming like tradition 10, we have no opinion on outside, AA has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought not be drawn into public controversy. Bill Ward has no opinion on outside issues outside of my own autonomy. And my autonomy means the ability to govern oneself. And most of my life, I governed myself in the defective character that are all based in fear. And what happened? It caused me a lot of conflict and pain and hurt a lot of people. So today, if I want to turn my will and my life over, the motto is, my autonomy is based in my relationship with God. And through that relationship with God, I actually have a relationship with myself. And I'll quote a line out of the doctor's opinion. These men believe in themselves. I believe in myself today, but they believe more in the power that pulls these chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. I believe more in the power than I do in myself, because I know it's the power that had the ability to change me and do things differently. Because of myself for many, many years, I could never change, and I always wanted to. So now I have no opinion on outside issues outside of my own autonomy. And hence, because of that, I'm not drawn into other people's drama because of their trauma. And I start realizing you have the right to have your opinion because that's your truth on the journey of your life. And mine is, I don't need to put up with that. And I can tell that person in a kind and loving way, or in a matter-of-factly way. And actually, I don't have to justify my truth at all to anybody anymore. And when you don't have to justify the truth and you don't have to justify yourself anymore, you've started to find self-love. And to try to maybe keep an open mind, because on the journey of truth, as you speak your truth to somebody that you're trying to set like a loving boundary to yourself, you got to keep in mind that maybe you could be wrong. So that's the journey, right? And what does step 10 in the big book produce? Produces all of what I just talked about. It produces that. And it takes a long time. It takes a lot of practice. I'm not going to say it takes a long time because it doesn't have to take a long fucking time. It can take a shorter time. It's all dependent on how much you're going to surrender to that process on page 84. And if you do follow that process and you do surrender, like the promises in step 10 that we read last week, you get placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected within your own being. And with your relationship with God, you know you're in neutral. You're not over here or over there. You're just right in the center. You haven't even sworn off. The problem's have been removed. You know, self has been removed. And then it goes on at the bottom of 85. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed these directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. We begin to really feel this God dope, this creator working in us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. So I begin to develop this vital sixth sense, that one that's based in love for yourself, the one that's based in authentic truth of who you are, and you can feel that and take that power. And as we kind of think about, okay, what does the big book says? It talks about the God inside of me as the unsuspected inner resource. Think about that word, resource. So if it's a resource, it's a version of a real source. It's a resource connected to this loving God that's out here somewhere. So I can find this unsuspected inner resource. I don't need to use all my old traits and habits. And why I'm kind of explaining all this and why step 10 is so important to me in recovery is because the next step is step 11. And as we move into step 11, we really want to source power. Like unbeknownst to us, unbeknownst to man, unbeknownst to fucking people. This power that, you know, you see that person in the room and they really are passionate about God and they pull on this power and you can see that something's really working in their life. They've accessed something maybe different than what you've experienced. And maybe you've been around for 10 or 20 years going, fuck, I wish I had what that guy has, right? Normally, why those guys have that extra power is because they're able to practice this inventory step and clear that channel over time. And then the step 11, instead of giving you like a 1 out of 10 of power, and you always think that that's all you're going to get because that's all you've ever gotten, now you start accessing like a 10 out of 10 power out of your step 11. And that's why it says, but we must go further, and that means more action. So I got to go further, and now I can source more power from the step 11. And all of this together will create removal of self, because we're designed to give, which is the 12th step, and we start giving freely without reservation. Why? Because that is the nature of a human being. And when you think of some of the times you feel the best in your life, it's always by giving. You know, giving your kid a present or giving someone something for free or fucking doing something kind, because that's how we're actually wired. And that's why it feels so good, because it's based in love. But we're conditioned to work from selfishness and fear. So we're unconditioning ourselves. So in the context of we're going against the culture that we're surrounded by. So what we're doing is very counterculture. And it doesn't even seem like it's the right thing to do sometimes because everyone else is doing it a different way. Which brings me back to my point. Like, this is fucking hard. And when you walk the road of being a spearhead for God, it's going to be a hard fucking road. But the benefits that you experience don't always come right here, right now. They come down the road. And that's the thing, like, well, you're like, well, when's down the road? I don't know when down the road is for anyone. I know that my experience, the benefit have come down the road. When I worked hard on not fucking women at my own disposal, when I worked hard at not just chasing the money and like having the status behind whatever that job was, when I worked hard at, you know, whatever it might have been in my recovery, judgment in a meeting, judgment with somebody else, working hard at these things and bringing God in, it's really paid off for me. Very simply, by the step 9 promises is kind of how it looks, right? That's not saying every day is that, but it pays off. And then as step 11 talks about, our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. What used to be a hunch or occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. So your thought life, your level of consciousness rises when your thinking is cleared of wrong motives. So if you're vibrating at a higher level, working in loving principles, you're going to start attracting what it is that you are, which is very simply why Bill W. in the chapter Sex Conduct on page, 68, at the bottom of 68 there, I think it was, he talked about, molding your safe and sound sex ideal for your future. We ask God to help us mold it, and then it says, then we live up to it. Why do we live up to this? Because that's what we will attract at some point. In your friendships, in your intimate relationships, in the world of the material and all of these things, we start attracting what we are. And we've all heard of the law of attraction, right? And it doesn't just mean you think about shit and get it. A lot of us think about that shit and still get the shitty end of the stick, because the basis of our being is still based in fear, and we're actually manifesting more fear. So this allows us to manifest more love and more goodness. And then we really have what the big book talks about, a profound alteration in the way that we live and see life. Profound alteration, right?